The United Nations says that 52 inmates at a prison in northeastern Congo, city of Bunia, have starved to death this year because of insufficient government funding. The DRC's jails are among the world's most overcrowded, with inmates living in squalid conditions on meagre rations. UN figures show that the Bunia prison operates at nearly 500% capacity. President Felix Tshisekedi told his cabinet earlier this month that he would personally ensure prisons across the country did not run out of food or medicine. Journalist Aime Zonveni is the editor of the Kinshasa Times, and he joins us now via Skype for more on this story. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. So welcome to the program. Let's start with the other story that we just ran. It's small comfort, I guess, for the family, but it is something to at least have a token of Patrice Lumumba to be able to come home.
Indeed, it has been very welcomed in the DRC, going on for years now. But also it is, on the other hand, de facto recognition by Belgium that that country was involved indeed in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. So in the DRC, the news has been welcomed, at least that now there is that tooth being returned to the country and they can be laid to rest.
How long has it been known that this Belgian soldier had taken this tooth? I mean, that's quite bizarre, but had taken this tooth almost as a trophy, I guess, back to Belgium.
Himself attests that he did participate in the assassination and in the dismembering of Patrice Lumumba, and that incident happened on the 17th of January 1961. So, which means this tooth has been kept. It's a great victory to have it back, or to hopefully have it released from Belgium and returned to the DRC.
All right. Let's move on to the other story now, which is the prisons. And this again seems like a long-running problem. And now we're seeing deaths. Is that new, or is this something that's just not been reported before?
It's not. Basically, this has been happening in the DRC for many decades now. Prisons have been left neglected. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, the DRC legal system is such that many people, including pre-trial detainees, people that are arrested by the police, and for minor offenses, because the police does not have the appropriate facilities to keep them, they end up being sent to jail and remain there, and therefore increasing the carceral population to 500, 6 times more than the operational capacity of most jails.
Tell us a little bit about the conditions inside those prisons. What do we know?
What you know in most prisons, more specifically the one in northeastern part of the DRC, namely the city of Bunia, is that this is a prison that was initially built for 220 inmates, but now reportedly has more than 1,300 people in there, meaning 6 times more than its normal capacity, on the one hand. On the other hand is that the DRC government very seldom availed the budget to provide food and to take care of the inmates, so that at the end of the day, you end up having overpopulated prisons that are not properly catered to. At the end of the day,
all right. And medicines, I would imagine also, this is something that keeps coming up. No budget allocated to make sure that medicines that are required are made available.
Because those budgets are allocated to run the prisons, or should be allocated to run the prisons, so not only to provide for food, but also for the other amenities such as medicines. And when the budget is not provided, food is missing, medicine is missing, and proper care even the salaries of the guardians and the prisoners is missing, and therefore the conditions are very dire in most prisons in the DRC.
Is it because that these are prisoners that there's less care about their well-being?
I think the government is overstretched. The DRC's economy is not as yet enabling the country to take care of all of its critical aspects. And you know, prisons are very essential for the justice system. So the government seems to prioritize things, and the prisons don't come high on the priority list of the government. So it's not because they are inmates, simply because the government has other priorities than and the prisons, and therefore this results into very difficult conditions prevailing in those carceral facilities.
If the country has no resources and no money, how then can President Tshisekedi make a promise to fix this? It looks as if this is something that he'll struggle to.
Well, there are many ways to fix this problem. There are some people, some of those inmates that technically should not be in prisons. Take the example of pretrial detainees or minor offenders. To me, and I think that is what also was recommended by the United Nations, those should be released, which will lead to numbers in the prisons coming down, and therefore enabling the government to take care of the lower number of people that do deserve to remain in prisons, and therefore that will make it easier for the government to feed them and properly take care of them. So reducing overpopulation issue, that is one way to go for it, while trying to find other donors to support other aspects of the prison system.
I would imagine, you know, prisons are supposed to be places of rehabilitation. I would imagine that under these kind of circumstances, rehabilitation doesn't happen very much or at all.
No, it doesn't happen at all, because people are focused on surviving their time in prison, both the inmates and even those that are in charge of keeping them. So rehabilitation itself becomes a lower priority. Once you are in jail, bottom line is make sure that you survive your time there. And mostly it's the families that come with food and take care of their family members in prison. So at the end of the day, people that got into jail, when they come out, I don't think they pretty much changed or got rehabilitated.
All right, so if nothing happens and this situation isn't dealt with, what you're saying is that we will see more deaths at prisons such as the one at Bunia.
In Bunia, you see what was reported is a cumulative number of what we saw as death out of starvation in 2020. But this is only because the United Nations reported these cases. But come to think of for instance, the biggest prison, which is in Kinshasa, called Makala, where there are 80 people for every 1,500 people. Same situation in most other prisons. So this is a very serious issue that has to be dealt with in a sustainable fashion, and it requires the government to invest the necessary funds.
The other danger in a situation like this is that you might find young offenders getting caught and slipping through the cracks there. Is that happening in the DRC?
It is indeed happening, even though the country has passed a law requiring that younger offenders should be separated from adults. But if you look at our prisons, that separation does not really happen. They are all locked in the same location. There is not that segregation. And unfortunately, we end up having situations where those younger offenders also get even more affected by their time in prison than instead getting rehabilitated.
All right, mon frère, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for that update on the tragedy which is playing out in the prisons in your country, but also, I suppose, some recompense in some way to see President Lumumba's tooth being returned to the DRC so that the family and the country can have some sort of peace. Thanks so much indeed for bringing these to our attention.
Thank you for having me.